This is the last meal. Some killings are personal. They're carried out by people who are known to their victims. These murders can be difficult to solve because often there are no signs of forced entry or struggle. The killer was known by the victim, but did not know that they were about to become a killer themselves. In 1974, residents of South Padre Island, Texas, were living their best beachside lives until one day, 14-year-old Mary Jane Kelly disappeared while walking home from a friend's house. She had been gone nearly 3 hours before her mom, Judy, called the police to report her missing. The girl lived with her mother and stepfather, Bill. Initially, the police thought it would be an easy case. Mary Jane was probably just hanging out somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. However, days turned into weeks with no sign of the missing teenager. Then, months later, the authorities got a tip that the Kelly family had moved away after receiving threats from a man claiming he had married Jane. But when the cops checked, the family was nowhere to be found. It almost looked like they vanished into thin air. As time passed, the investigation went cold, and everyone in town seemed to forget about Mary Jane. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles north in Atlanta, a man named Wayne Williams was busy building his own empire. He built it brick by brick, house by house, taking out mortgages in other people's names. He would then rent the homes back to his unsuspecting victims and collect their payments, eventually defaulting on the loans and leaving the homeowners with massive debts and no place to live. By the time authorities caught on to what he was doing, Wayne had already conned them all. He was also about to add another notch to his belt. It was April 26, 1980, when Wayne drove his car into the parking lot outside number 23, 138th Street in Atlanta. What happened next has forever cemented this date in history. In 2002, a movie about the events that unfolded here was released. The chilling tale took audiences around the world and left them wondering if such horror could actually exist. A knock came at the front door, and when no one answered, Wayne tried the handle. It was unlocked. He walked right in. No one was home except for the family cat. Wayne felt a strange sensation come over him. It was an urge to kill. He picked up a knife, but instead of feeling excitement, he felt nothing. He put the knife down and walked out, getting into his car. But as he started the engine, something inside him snapped. Wayne decided to return to the house. This time, he climbed through an unlocked window and walked to the bedroom. There he saw the bedsheets. An evil grin spread across Wayne's face as he yanked them off the bed, revealing a dark stain in the center. He stood above it and pulled his pants down, letting himself go in a way he never had before. He hadn't chosen his victim, but when he did, he chose her carefully. His first victim would be Nathaniel Cater, a young black male. Wayne wanted to start small, but something went wrong, and he ended up killing the man's entire family, too. Once he was done, he fled the scene. As the years went on, more and more victims piled up. Wayne always struck in the same area, targeting young black males. At first, the police thought they were dealing with a madman. They believed the killer was white due to the area he was working in, but they couldn't find any evidence. And since most of his victims knew each other, they didn't think it was a serial killer. But when a fiber analyst discovered traces of carpet in some of the victims' hair, everything changed. The authorities now had physical evidence linking all the crimes. It had to be a madman. Only someone warped enough to take trophies from their victims would do such a thing. But as it turned out, Wayne wasn't a madman at all. He was simply misunderstood. Despite being convicted for killing 23 people, Wayne still claims his innocence. He says he was actually trying to help the homeless people he killed, claiming they died of drug overdoses. He said the murders were an accident, and he only took trophies to commemorate the occasion. But when forensic evidence tied him to the crimes, Wayne changed his story. He admitted he was guilty, but claimed to have killed only 2 people. He said the rest were accidental deaths. So why does Wayne even bother denying his crimes? He says he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison thinking about all the fun things he'll miss out on. But if that's the case, why not admit what you've done? Maybe if you tell the truth, the court will be more lenient with you. Sadly, that's not how it works. If Wayne wants to get out early, he needs to convince everyone he's innocent. That's why he's always denying his crimes and claiming there are reasonable doubts about the case against him. But one look at Wayne's smug face, and it's clear he's enjoying his 15 minutes of fame. All the attention is going to his head. Wayne thinks the real reason he's locked up is because he beat the cops to the punch. He planned his killings meticulously, making sure to be long gone by the time they arrived at the crime scenes. Wayne believes that if he could just prove he wasn't the killer, the real killer would come forward. So why does Wayne keep coming up with new stories about the crimes? Because he loves the attention. And now, meet Margaret Geller. One day, in the early 1980s, a traveling salesman named Ed Gein wandered into the small town of Plainfield, New Hampshire. He was a quiet guy, not much of a talker. As he walked down the street, he saw a nice farmhouse and stopped to admire it. He knocked on the door and introduced himself to the owner, Margaret Geller. Margaret welcomed him in, offering him tea and cookies. She was a collector of all things spooky and macabre, and she hoped Ed would stick around a few days so they could hunt for artifacts together. While waiting for Ed to make up his mind, Margaret showed him around her home. As he walked through the halls, he noticed an array of odd items displayed on shelves and hanging from the walls, including shrunken human heads and animal skulls. He also noticed a trapdoor near the stairs leading to the basement. Margaret explained that's where she kept her collection of bones and teeth. Ed was fascinated. For the next few days, he and Margaret explored the surrounding area, searching for buried treasure. But Ed was never interested in any of the items Margaret found. He told her about a murder he'd witnessed in Wisconsin and how the killer had removed the victim's skin. That reminded Margaret of an old dream she'd had, one she'd never forgotten. In it, a man had skinned a woman alive, and when he opened her up, there was no heart inside. When Ed heard that, he immediately decided to stay in Plainfield longer. He and Margaret began visiting local cemeteries, disinterring bodies, and removing their skin. Ed would then tan the hides and make a variety of products from them, including belts, wallets, hats, and coats. Eventually, they were caught, and Margaret was sentenced to prison. At her trial, she explained to the jury that she'd only agreed to help Ed after learning he was already a suspect in the Wisconsin murders. She didn't know how many people he'd killed, and she feared he might target her next if she refused to cooperate. The judge accepted her explanation, believing she'd been coerced. He reduced her sentence from 10 to 4 years. However, after serving only 3, Margaret was released early. She returned home in 1952, married one of her cellmates, and spent the rest of her life running a junk shop in her garage. But despite moving on with her life, the demons of her past continued to haunt her. Every night, she heard voices whispering to her, and every time she closed her eyes, she relived the horrors of the basement. And then one day, local journalist Daniel Reeves came asking about the missing girl. Margaret realized her collection needed one last piece. Daniel, as soon as he stepped inside the attic, was hungrier than usual. Something was changing up there. And when Daniel recorded his discovery, the attic made its presence known. First, the chain snapped, followed by a deep inhale. Daniel gasped, stumbling backwards as the attic devoured the sound of his voice. Then suddenly, the attic was upon him, reaching through the loose floorboards, dragging him down into the darkness. Daniel screamed, thrashing against the nails and splinters as the attic claimed its newest victim. His recording tumbled from the attic door, fluttering to the ground like a fallen leaf. When the sheriff finally kicked down the door at dawn, he found only Margaret's smiling corpse seated at the dinner table, plates set for two. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.